the audio and everything else. Maybe try.
I think that's a flash, I think. Wait, he just said, here we go.
Oh, I got it.
You got it? It's on.
Yes, there is sound. There is sound coming in or something like that.
Should be back.
I'm Robert Herman on behalf
Is it live now?
Yeah, it's live again.
Okay, I'm gonna hang up. We're gonna hang up.
Okay.
Cell phones have probably been put to vibrate. In the spirit of Jewish tenet of Tikkun Olam, which is to repair the world and repair the earth. Hopefully we're going to accomplish some of that this evening. And it's a great pleasure. I introduce Chief Joe Carter of the Martha's Vineyard Social Leadership Foundation and let him handle the proceedings. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Rob. As Rob stated, I'm Joseph Carter. I'm a member of the Board of Directors of the Martha's Vineyard Social Leadership Foundation, and I'll be joined by a fellow board member, Arnie Reese-Preisman, as your moderators. First off, we want to thank the Hebrew Center for opening its doors to this worthy program, and I ask everybody to give the Hebrew Center a round of applause. I have the privilege to welcome all of you. This event is sponsored by the Martha's Vineyard Social Justice Leadership Foundation and the Martha's Vineyard Hebrew Center's Social Action Committee. Our gracious participants up here will be State Representative Dylan Fernandes, ACLU attorney Laura Rotolo, and Cape Cod attorney Gabriella Bonfim Moraes, who this evening generously provides an interpretation in Brazilian Portuguese. The speakers will make their presentations, and in the time remaining, will take questions. However, Attorney Rotolo will present a PowerPoint presentation, and after each slide, Attorney Bonfim Moraes will translate the slide, which will be followed by a brief opportunity for questions. This event is now being live streamed online at the Brazilian site Brasilgada and recorded by MVTV. Audience members will not be videotaped for any broadcast or reproduction. It now gives me great pleasure to introduce to you Dylan Fernandes. Dylan Fernandes is our state representative. You're ready. In the Massachusetts legislature. Dylan is a fourth-generation Falmouth resident who grew up in Woods Hole and has worked tirelessly to promote economic opportunity for all state residents, ensure strong environmental stewardship, and protect the most vulnerable in our society. Dylan served as the digital director in the office of Attorney General Maura Healey, and also worked in the office's Consumer Advocacy and Respond Division, as well as the Civil Rights Division. He also mediated disputes to get money back for his consumers ripped off by unscrupulous businesses. In the Civil Rights Division, he fought to protect the rights of those being discriminated against in housing, employment, retail, and education, and was an unwavering advocate for disability rights. Dylan believes that a government that is transparent, responsive, and engaging will best serve its people. Please welcome State Representative Dylan Fernandes with a round of applause. It now gives me pleasure to introduce Arnie, who will introduce our other two guests. Let's give another round of applause.
Wow, that was quite the introduction. Well, thank you to everyone for coming out this evening, and thank you to the Martha's Vineyard Social Justice Leadership Foundation for organizing the second forum on immigration, and in particular, we're going to look at the Safe Communities Act. And it's just a pleasure to be back here. I was at the first forum as well, and and this is such a critical issue during this time. So I'm thrilled to be here to be able to speak about it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of how the president's anti-immigration rhetoric is hurting specifically the Vineyard. And then I'm going to talk about the Safe Communities Act for a little while and why we need to protect our immigrant communities and what you guys can do to get involved. So words matter, right? I mean, we found that out more than ever this past couple of months. And so Trump's xenophobic rhetoric is not only fundamentally wrong, but it's starting to impact our local economy. And I don't know if you guys saw the Globe article recently that said that international tourism has dropped by 12 to 14% since Trump took office. And so for the Vineyard and for Nantucket, which get $35 million a year from international tourists, that means millions of dollars lost for our local island. So that is a huge, his rhetoric is already having a huge impact on our local economy. And also, the halt on H-2B visas, sorry, it's kind of a mouthful, has left many businesses on the island struggling to find workers to fill jobs that they typically did year-round. And so that also has a drastic impact on our economy because we're at full employment right now in Massachusetts. It's incredibly hard to find workers, and our tourism season is extended longer and longer here on the Cape and Islands. So we can't just rely on students who are coming home from college because they're not here long enough to work the jobs that we need them for. And that although immigration is largely a federal issue, there are ways that the state can intervene to protect our immigrant communities. And my family came to America from Portugal and Puerto Rico and England. And my view is that we are all immigrants here. The only people that are not immigrants are Native Americans or the descendants of slaves. And so that's really how I come at this issue. And the hateful rhetoric about immigrants being, not only the hateful rhetoric about immigrants being criminals that we've heard from the federal government is not only racist, it's just false. It's just not true and not backed up in data. And we know, based on real data and real facts, that immigrants are less likely to commit crimes. And the reason is obvious, right? I mean, if you're undocumented or you know someone who's undocumented, you're probably not going to want to get involved with the local police. Like, it's pretty clear. And so, it's just intuitive that our immigrant communities would be less likely to commit crime, and the data backs that up. But unfortunately, fear of interacting with the police is what drives many people in immigrant communities from reporting crimes. And that is a real problem because what we've seen is that issues of domestic violence and sexual assault, wage theft, and the like do not go reported to the authorities because of fear of deportation. And so that fear actually makes our local communities less safe, right? And this is why we need to protect our immigrants' communities, and this is why we want our immigrant communities to know that we are here for you, and I'm certainly here for you as your state rep to help protect you. And it's why I'm a proud co-sponsor of the Safe Communities Act, because I want to promote public safety and protect our immigrant community. And the Safe Communities Act, which I'll talk about, and then Laura will get into a little bit more later, but the Safe Communities Act basically says state and local law enforcement cannot detain people based on immigrant status and only report someone to ICE, basically if they have a felony. And so why is this important? Well, this will help keep crime rates low. This will help support community policing for obvious reasons. If people can trust, if immigrant communities can trust police, they'll be able to report crimes and we'll be able to forge those relationships. So we know community policing is a really valuable asset in the police toolbox. We know that having a Safe Communities Act would not jeopardize federal funding. And so that's a big misconception out there. A lot of selectmen, a lot of town councilors and city councilors are afraid that if they become a safe community, that their federal funding will be in jeopardy. And look, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not even a constitutional lawyer, but I bet one would tell you that the federal government cannot compel state and local government officials to enforce federal law. Right? That seems pretty basic to me. It also protects our government from liability issues. You know, if a local law enforcement detains someone, that has huge ramifications around Fourth Amendment rights, and that local town could be liable for a lawsuit that could actually end up costing the town hundreds of thousands. You know, I'm not sure what the suits go to, but it could end up costing the town a lot of money. It also, you know, the Safe Communities Act also helps protect public health. And people are healthier when they feel that they can reach out to their local communities and their local law enforcement for help. And it protects our local economies. Deporting law-abiding state residents destabilizes families and communities. And in Boston alone, about 500 people are deported. 500 children each year lose a parent who is deported, and that's just terrible. I mean, if you can just even imagine that. And then also think about the financial and human costs associated with losing a parent. A lot of times that kid has to be placed in foster care, and that has huge, not only kind of emotional impacts on the children's lives, but also huge financial impacts to our state. So it's kind of counterintuitive to begin with. And it also protects, the Safe Communities Act also protects county and municipal budgets. Mass incarceration is expensive. And one of the things we're looking at the State House is kind of a more comprehensive criminal justice reform. But I think the Safe Communities Act could play a part in that. And so I'm fighting for this bill at the State House. I'm a co-sponsor of the bill. And as a member of the Progressive Caucus, we sent a letter to the Speaker naming this bill as one of our top priorities this session. And you know, I went out to the State House steps to rally for this during Immigrant Advocacy Day. And I want everyone to know that there's a hearing coming up for the bill. It's on June 9th. So that's a really important date to mark your calendars. If you're free, it's a Friday, to come up to the State House, make your voice heard. You know, before that hearing, send a letter to the chairman of the committee, send a letter to the Speaker of the House. That's really important, I think, to reach out to leadership in the House and the Senate to make sure that they know that you are all supporting this bill. Because I did a forum a couple weeks ago with all the legislators from Falmouth, and I'm the only Democrat. There's 3 legislators that represent Falmouth. I'm the only Democrat. I'm actually only one of 2 Democrats in the House on the entire Cape. Pretty Republican area we live in. But there was a lot of people at this meeting that stood up and spoke about what the Safe Communities Act meant to them. And there were immigrants in the room who were talking about how unsafe they felt without something like the Safe Communities Act in place. And you could see how, for these Republican representatives, it actually moved them a little bit in favor of this act. And you could see that getting through. So that advocacy, that face-to-face advocacy, and that reaching out to leadership in the House, that's really effective. And I hope you all join me in doing that. And the Safe Communities Act is only a step. We need to pursue comprehensive criminal justice reform and repeal the law put forth by Governor Baker that makes it illegal for undocumented immigrants to obtain a driver's license. That's another huge part of public safety. And so I'll just end by telling you a little story about a guy I met last week. His name's Mario, and Mario immigrated to the Vineyard from Brazil when he was 12 years old. And he, like many immigrants to this country, brought with him ambition and drive and ingenuity. And he started a small Oh Deer franchise here on the Vineyard, which is, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's a natural way of, I see a lot of head nods, it's a natural way of spraying for ticks. And so he worked hard, he grew his company, and today at the age of 30, he employs 6 people. And I met Mario last week because I had the pleasure of honoring him at the SCORE Awards as Business Person of the Year for the Cape and Islands. And immigrants bring a really unique perspective that not only promotes cultural exchange, but also promotes our economy. And to me, Mario is a perfect example of what makes this country great. And we need to be helping out our immigrant communities and immigrants like Mario. Thank you.
I apologize for the disconnect in my notes, but now I introduce to you Ani Reisman.
Like Joe, I'm also a member of the board of the Martha's Vineyard Social Justice Leadership Foundation, and I'm here to introduce our next speaker, who's Laura Rotolo, and she's here, and she will be joined by Gabriella Bonfim Moraes, who will offer an interpretation in Portuguese. There are 4 topics to be presented by Laura, and we'll take just a very short break after each one of them to see if there are any questions before we go on to the next one. And I mean a very short break, like 5 minutes. And then at the end, we hope that of the whole thing here this evening, we will have enough time to have some questions. Laura Rotolo is a staff counsel and community advocate at the ACLU of Massachusetts, where she focuses on issues relating to immigrants. She joined the ACLU 10 years ago, first as a human rights fellow studying immigration detention conditions, and currently, Laura works to create policies that safeguard fundamental rights, as well as challenge policies that do not. As a Latina and an immigrant from Argentina, she advocates within Latino immigrant communities in Massachusetts. Laura is a graduate of Tufts, the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy, and American University's Washington College of Law. Gabriella Bonfim Moraes has been assisting clients to achieve their personal and professional goals through proper immigration law procedures for almost a decade. Her practice on the Cape involves the preparation of family and work visas, as well as green card and waiver applications. She has worked as an associate attorney at a Boston law firm, where her experience included writing appeals to federal agencies to challenge immigration rulings. Internationally, she provides counseling in all areas of legislative and electoral law. And she has interned in the State House of Representatives in Brazil and in the Consulate of Argentina. So I give you both Laura and Gabriella. Thank you.
So with an Argentine and a Brazilian, you're just happy it's not World Cup season. But today we're friends. Just today. Hi everybody, good evening. Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm so happy to be here with you. And hello everyone out there and over there who's watching on Facebook or wherever you're watching. So glad to have you here. And thank you to Gabriella for providing translation. She has graciously translated this entire PowerPoint into Portuguese. So the PowerPoint will also be available later. We'll post it on our website, which is ACLU-MA.org, in the Know Your Rights section. All right, okay, so I'm calling this the new threat to immigrants and how to resist this new threat. And what I want to do today is, as Arnie said, I want to get through 4 different topics. The first one is, what has changed under the Trump administration? I want to just go over some of the new policies, what they say on the record, and what we're seeing on the ground. The second is, what rights do I have if I encounter an ICE agent, an immigration agent? What happens? What are my rights? The third is, how can I prepare myself and my family if I feel that I am vulnerable to deportation? And lastly, how can we stand up together? And Representative Fernandes has already gone through a really good explanation of the Safe Communities Act. I'll talk a little bit about that and about some other ways that you can get involved in your community to really stand up together and resist this as a policy.
Boa noite a todos, boa noite o pessoal da comunidade brasileira que está assistindo pelo Facebook, pessoal da Zucada, boa noite a vocês. E essa apresentação de hoje vai ser dividida em tópicos. Esses tópicos vão ser relativos ao que tem mudado agora na questão da imigração sobre a administração de Trump. O primeiro tópico vai ser esse, o segundo tópico vai ser quais os direitos que eu tenho se eu encontrar um policial ou um agente da ICE. O terceiro vai ser como eu posso preparar a mim e a minha família caso isso aconteça. E o quarto vai ser como é que nós poderemos nos defender e resistir a essas ameaças juntos.
Great. Thank you. So the first part is that a lot has changed. We are living really in a brand new world. And I wanted to show you a 1-minute video by my colleague Omar Jadwat, who's a staff attorney. He's the head of the Immigrant Rights Project at our national office. And after we saw 2 or 3 policies come out in January, and then the Department of Homeland Security come out with implementing regulations, this is what he had to say.
So we've just seen the final signed versions of DHS's implementing instructions under the President's mass deportation executive order scheme. And what we've seen with these implementing instructions is very much what was promised in the executive orders, which is a total disregard for due process, for human decency, for fairness in the immigration system, even for basic things like protections for vulnerable children who come here fleeing persecution. All of those things have been cast aside in these instructions in favor of a single-minded focus on deporting and detaining as many people as possible, as quickly as possible. What's critical to remember, though, is that Donald Trump does not have the last word here. The courts and the public can stand up, as we have before, to President Trump's unconstitutional and un-American plans.
Bom, esse vídeo que foi mostrado agora fala que o que tem acontecido hoje é justamente que o Trump está tornando realidade o que ele havia prometido. Inclusive, esse desrespeito ao devido processo legal, inclusive a questão de não proteger crianças vulneráveis que têm os seus pais deportados. Só que o que é importante dizer é que a última palavra não é dele. Ou seja, as pessoas ainda têm o poder de se defender e de tentar, de alguma forma, resistir a essas políticas imigratórias.
All right, so what has changed at the policy level? I will also get into what we're seeing on the ground, but this is what we're seeing as a policy matter. We're seeing more ICE agents. They have put in requests to the budget process for more money for more ICE agents. ICE, of course, is Immigration Customs Enforcement. That is the law enforcement agency that does the deportation, the enforcement.
O que mudou agora sob a administração de Trump na prática? A parte política das leis também será falada, mas na prática, o que mudou? Em primeiro lugar, o que mudou foi a presença de mais agentes da ICE. Existem mais agentes da ICE em campo agora.
We're also seeing the end of any prioritization of deportation. Under the Obama administration, they were at least trying to understanding that we can't deport everyone all at once, to prioritize people with serious criminal records. Now, that didn't always happen, but at least there was a policy on the books to do that. The new policies essentially say everyone is fair game, everyone who's out of status is vulnerable.
Sob a administração de Obama, existiu uma tentativa de tentar se entender que você não pode deportar todos ao mesmo tempo. Então, eles tentavam fazer de uma forma em que existiam prioridades de pessoas que deveriam ser deportadas. Agora, sob essa nova administração, não existem mais prioridades para a deportação.
We're also seeing the increase in something called expedited removals. These are deportations that happen without any due process. They happen very quickly because of the way that the person came to the country or how long they've been here. It's something that wasn't being used so much in the past, but now it is. And so it means that people get deported without seeing a court, without going in front of a judge, and without the ability to make their case for why they can stay here.
O que tem acontecido com maior frequência é o uso da remoção acelerada, que é uma forma de deportação sem o devido processo legal. Ou seja, a depender da quantidade de tempo que a pessoa está aqui no país, ela pode ser deportada sem ver um juiz, sem ir para um tribunal, de forma absurdamente rápida.
We're also seeing, related to that there is less prosecutorial discretion to stop deportation cases. Local agents under past administrations were encouraged to cancel or stop or slow down deportation of certain classes of people, like mothers of small children, people who were in vulnerable situations. That has been taken back now, and the orders that are come down are, you are to deport anyone you come across.
Antigamente, agentes locais de imigração eram encorajados a não deportar todo mundo. Ou seja, por exemplo, mães de filhos pequenos, determinadas pessoas, eles eram encorajados a simplesmente cancelar a deportação. Agora, o que tem sido visto é que não existe mais essa discrição do Ministério Público na hora de cancelar as ordens de deportação. A sua ordem agora é deportar quem passar pela sua frente.
And one particularly troubling policy is that the federal government has now said that they are going to go after the parents of children who were smuggled into the country. So parents who maybe were able to come here first, fleeing violence, and then sent for their children to come illegally. Now those parents may face criminal charges for smuggling their own children.
Agora o governo tem o objetivo de punir os pais que agiram com contrabando com relação aos próprios filhos. Ou seja, aqueles pais que vieram para cá primeiro e depois trouxeram os filhos para cá para o país de forma ilegal, agora vão ser punidos por estarem contrabandeando os próprios filhos.
We're also seeing, of course, a great deal of pressure on cities and local governments to comply, to collaborate with immigration deportation, to be part of this deportation machine.
As cidades estão sendo encorajadas a participar dessa máquina de deportação. Elas estão sendo encorajadas, quase que forçadas de alguma forma, a colaborar com essas novas políticas de imigração de Trump.
One good piece of news is that while the Trump administration, or at least during the campaign, they said that the first thing they were going to do is to get rid of this DACA status. DACA stands for a really silly name, but it's the Dreamers. It's Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. It means if you came as a child and meet certain requirements, you get this temporary legal status. Trump has said he was going to end that in day one. He hasn't. That status still exists. It's tricky whether you should be applying or reapplying, and you really need to talk to an attorney if that's your situation, but that status at least still exists.
Uma das coisas boas que não terminou foi o DACA. O DACA é para aquelas pessoas que chegaram aqui crianças e preenchem certos aspectos, elas ganham um status legal temporário. Elas não são deportadas por algum tempo. E durante a parte em que Trump fazia campanha, ele disse que uma das primeiras coisas com as quais ele terminaria seria o DACA. Felizmente, o DACA ainda não terminou e continua. A questão de você aplicar agora ou de renovar o seu, é claro que é algo que você tem que considerar com calma, falando com um advogado, mas o DACA não terminou e isso é uma notícia maravilhosa.
So who is at risk of being deported now? We have three main groups. People who are here in the U.S. without legal status, so that's anyone out of status. If you have overstayed your visa, if you came illegally, if you came legally and then lost your status. Persons who have a final order of removal, and people who have green cards but who may have committed a crime that could make them deportable.
Quem está correndo o risco de ser deportado neste momento? Em primeiro lugar, são aquelas pessoas que estão aqui no país sem status legal, ou seja, aquelas pessoas que vieram para cá ilegalmente ou aquelas pessoas que vieram para cá legalmente, expiraram a permanência ou de alguma outra forma perderam seu status legal. Em segundo lugar, aquelas pessoas que têm uma ordem de deportação, de remoção contra si. Em terceiro lugar, aquelas pessoas que têm o green card, mas têm certos crimes em seu histórico.
And who is most at risk of being picked up by ICE? Again, while everyone is sort of fair game for deportation, anyone who is arrested, who comes into contact with the criminal justice system, with the police, Those are the people that are most easily flagged to immigration and who are most easily deported.
Quem corre um risco maior de ser deportado? Nós sabemos que várias pessoas agora estão correndo risco, mas de quem é o risco maior de ser deportado? Na verdade, qualquer pessoa que for presa ou entrar em contato com o sistema jurídico, nesse momento tem uma probabilidade maior de ser deportado.
So what are we seeing? What is the effect of this? We're seeing that there are 40% more immigration arrests in this year since the same time last year, and that we are seeing twice as many non-criminal arrests. That means people without any criminal record, twice as many arrests of those people.
O que aconteceu nesse último ano foi que 40%, aumentou em 40% o número de prisões por imigração. E mais de 2 vezes duplicou o número de prisões não relacionadas a crimes que foram cometidos.
Okay, so what are we seeing on the ground? We're seeing more reports of ICE agents in communities. That there's no question. Anybody you ask, there's more of them around.
Então, na prática, o que tem acontecido? Em primeiro lugar, mais agentes da ICE nas comunidades.
We're seeing ICE detaining people at courthouses more. This is something that has always happened, but there has been an increase of ICE just being around in courthouses, of ICE finding out when people are due in court. And this has had a tremendous impact on people being afraid to seek justice through the court system.
Algo que tem aumentado muito nos últimos tempos é o ICE detendo pessoas dentro dos tribunais. Eles conseguem descobrir quando as pessoas vão ter uma audiência e esperam as pessoas lá. O problema disso é que mais e mais pessoas estão com medo de buscar o sistema jurídico por medo de serem presas, inclusive nos tribunais.
And then we're seeing people detained when they go to check in at ICE. Many times, if you are in deportation proceedings, ICE will put something called an order of supervision on you. And that means that you have to maybe wear an ankle monitor, but definitely check in, either by phone or in person, once a month or so. And what we're seeing is that people who were checking in regularly because they didn't really have a fear of deportation because they were a low priority, are now checking in. They are now a priority and they're being detained as they do what they're supposed to be doing, which is checking in.
Outra coisa que tem acontecido são mais pessoas sendo detidas na hora que vão se apresentar ao ICE. Muitas vezes, no processo de deportação, você é obrigado a se apresentar ao ICE usando aquela pulseira no calcanhar, ou às vezes você recebe um cartãozinho e tem que ir lá uma vez por mês. Mas, de qualquer forma, o que tem acontecido é que agora, muitas vezes, a pessoa vai lá se apresentar e o que acontece é que ela é presa.
We're also seeing that people who are in the process of getting legal status, but having completed that process, are being detained if they have an old order of deportation. This is a complete shift in policy. In the past, if you had an old order, but something happened in your life that allowed you to get legal status, the government would let that process play out. Now we have seen in Lawrence a very something that made the media, with 3 people went in for their interviews for their green cards and were detained and deported.
Algo que tem acontecido ultimamente e que foi uma mudança total com relação às políticas anteriores é que pessoas que estão no processo para a obtenção de um status legal, mas que têm ordens de deportação antiga, agora estão sendo detidas com base nessas ordens de deportação antiga, uma coisa que antigamente não era encorajada.
And now a good piece of news that we're seeing is that many cities and towns are taking steps to combat this at the local level. They're cutting off collaboration with immigration and they're being very specific about it and very deliberate about it.
Muitas cidades estão cortando, estão cessando a contribuição com o ICE e tentando de alguma forma defender para não colocar em prática essas políticas migratórias.
Now here's something that we're not seeing in our area and that I want to make sure people know we're not seeing. There are no raids, there have been no raids in our area.
É importante falar isso para as pessoas, especialmente para o pessoal do grupo aí que está assistindo, que uma das coisas que não está acontecendo agora são batidas nessa área, nessa região.
We're not seeing ICE doing enforcement at schools or churches or synagogues, although some parents have been picked up near schools after picking up or dropping off a child.
Por enquanto, os agentes da ICE não estão detendo pessoas em escolas e igrejas.
There is an old memo that says that those are sensitive locations and that I should not be present there deporting people. And so far, the administration has still stuck to that old memo.
Existe memorando antigo que fala que essas áreas são áreas sensíveis e que a imigração não deveria deter pessoas nessas áreas. Até então, isso tem sido obedecido.
And despite all the rhetoric, despite all the threats, there has been no funding cuts to sanctuary cities. Partially because we believe it can't be done legally, but also the administration has just stepped back from that threat.
Apesar das ameaças, algo que não tem acontecido é o corte de fundos de financiamento para as cidades. Santuário.
And ICE is not going after people on DACA status. People who have lost their DACA status may be vulnerable to deportation, but those dreamers that currently have that status so far are not being deported.
Outra coisa é que a imigração não está indo atrás das pessoas que são beneficiárias do DACA. É claro que aquelas pessoas que perderam seus status estão sujeitas à deportação. Todavia, aquelas pessoas que no momento são beneficiárias do DACA não estão sendo detidas.
And so this is to give you an idea of what we're seeing, what the changes have been, and what they are on the ground. Before I move on to the next piece, do we want to just take a few questions on that?
You talked about very attitude to the whole situation. Are you suggesting open borders? And if not, what are you thinking? Oh.
So I have to say, do you want to say that with the mic?
Sure. I mean, I can't even tell. Is it right? Okay, now. What I was asking is, what is the thinking in terms of either completely open borders or kind of what? Just leave it at that.
Pessoal do grupo, a primeira pergunta foi se a advogada da ACLU sugere então que sejam abertas as fronteiras do país.
So Breitbart News actually did call me an open borders activist. That's the first time anybody's ever called me that, but apparently I am to them. None of this has to do with immigration policy of who gets to come and who doesn't get to come. This is all about due process. This is all about assuming we deport people, how do we do it in a way that's humane and upholds the Constitution?
Pessoal do grupo, a resposta da pergunta foi o seguinte, que isso não tem nada a ver com abrir fronteiras, apesar dela ser mesmo um ativista dessa abertura de fronteiras. Isso tem a ver com o devido processo legal na hora da deportação. Se querem deportar pessoas, como fazer isso através da Constituição e como fazer isso de uma forma que seja humana.
When you say no raids in this area, what area are you talking about?
In Massachusetts.
Ela perguntou em que área não estão acontecendo as batidas e a resposta foi na área inteira de Massachusetts.
Can you talk briefly about the case of Commonwealth versus none?
Yes. Okay, so there is a case, and actually I have an update to that case today. There's a case pending before the Supreme Judicial Court right now, that's the highest state court in Massachusetts, called Commonwealth versus Lund. And that case is about whether or not the federal government can ask police to detain someone on their behalf. And the argument is that local police, in order to detain somebody on behalf of ICE without a warrant, without probable cause, they need their own authority to do that, and that there actually is no authority under either our laws or our Constitution for local police to be doing that. As our director put it, our police can't arrest someone just because somebody asked them to, even if that somebody is the federal government. The problem is that the federal government is doing just that, asking for that kind of collaboration without any foundation.
A pergunta foi sobre a conversa agora de um caso famoso que está na corte mais alta de Massachusetts. E a questão é a seguinte, a habilidade das autoridades legais agirem a mando da federação em termos de imigração, e é dito que a federação quer que as autoridades legais prendam pessoas em nome da imigração. O problema é que não há base legal para que isso seja feito, e esse caso está sendo discutido agora nas cortes mais altas de Massachusetts.
And the update is that actually today, the ACLU of Massachusetts filed a petition on behalf of Mr. Lund, the defendant in that case, because not only was he held by the local court on this thing called an ICE detainer, he's also been in immigration detention since February with nowhere to go. He was born in a refugee camp in Thailand to Cambodian parents, and neither Cambodia nor Thailand see him as a citizen of that country. So many times, for months at a time, he has been detained by immigration to further his deportation, but they are not able to deport him because no country will take him. So we filed a petition on his behalf today seeking his release.
A associação da qual ela faz parte protocolou hoje um pedido para que ele seja solto, o réu deste caso, porque ele não tem lugar para ir. Ele não é um cidadão da Tailândia, ele não é reconhecido como um cidadão do Camboja, então eles pediram para que ele seja solto.
Okay, so the next part that I want to talk about is what do you do if you come across an ICE agent? And a lot of this is similar to what you do if you come across your local police. What are your rights?
A parte sobre a qual vai ser falada agora são quais são os seus direitos caso você entre em contato com um agente da imigração.
Okay, so you should know, it's very important to know that the United States Constitution gives us all certain rights regardless of our immigration status.
É importante saber que a Constituição dos Estados Unidos dá direitos às pessoas independentemente do seu status imigratório.
And that knowing your rights gives you the power to decide when and how to use them.
Saber quais são os seus direitos te dá o poder de saber como e quando usá-los.
Now we can talk about what our rights are, but in practice there is no one correct answer for what you should or should not do when encountering law enforcement. Each situation is very different, and each person needs to decide in that moment what is right, what is the most safe option, and what is the most correct option for them. But knowing our rights empowers us to make those decisions.
Nós vamos falar agora sobre quais são os seus direitos, mas não existe uma resposta certa e uma resposta errada quanto a isso. Cada situação tem fatos diferentes, então é importante cada pessoa saber seus direitos e analisá-los para escolher, porque a escolha é sua, como você vai usar os direitos que você tem.
So the first right that applies to all of us is the right to remain silent. You hear it on Law and Order, chunk, you have the right to remain silent, the right to contact an attorney. That's not just if you get arrested. That is all the time. You can never be forced to speak to a police officer or an ICE agent, with a few exceptions that we'll get to.
O primeiro direito que as pessoas têm, e é muito parecido com o que nós assistimos nos seriados, é o direito de permanecer em silêncio. Você não é obrigado a falar com os agentes da imigração, a não ser em certos casos específicos, que são, na verdade, uma exceção.
So you have the right to refuse to speak to an officer, and you can do it nicely, you can do it politely, but you don't have to say anything about yourself.
Você não precisa falar nada sobre você mesmo. É claro que a forma correta, digamos assim, de fazer isso é com educação. Todavia, você não tem que contar nada sobre a sua vida para um policial, um agente do ICE.
And in your home, you do not have to open the door. Again, with some exceptions that we'll get to, for the most part, if an ICE agent comes to your home and asks to come in, you do not have to open that door. And that sounds maybe basic, but many people don't know that. And it really gets them into trouble because an ICE agent walks through the door and starts asking all sorts of questions. We get nervous, we start answering, they start asking questions of other people in our home or in our building, and all of a sudden people are being detained and deported.
Com algumas exceções, você não tem obrigação de abrir a porta da sua casa. Isso pode parecer uma coisa muito básica, uma coisa muito simples, mas a verdade é que muitas pessoas na hora do nervoso acabam esquecendo disso. Então, se algum agente da ICE for na sua casa, você não tem a obrigação de abrir a porta da sua casa para eles.
And so the exception is, if there is a warrant. If your local police comes to your door, if the Vineyard Haven police come to your door and say, open up, we have a warrant, it's probably a good idea to open the door, because they probably can get through.
A exceção é a presença de um mandado assinado por um juiz. Então, se a polícia ou um agente do ICE bater na sua porta e falar, abre a porta, porque nós temos um mandado contra você, aí sim é uma boa ideia você abrir a porta.
And this is how you know that it's a real warrant. A real warrant is something that is signed by a judge, or a magistrate judge, or a judicial officer. Right here it says Michelle Burns, U.S. Magistrate Judge. Why do I say that? Because ICE has its own kind of warrant that is not signed by a judge. They call it a warrant for an arrest of an alien or a warrant for removal. But they may as well call it a potato because it is not a warrant. It is not signed by a judge. You'll see there that it is signed by an immigration officer. And that means that they don't have the right to enter your home unless you open the door and let them in.
Aqui na tela tem um exemplo de um mandado verdadeiro assinado por um juiz. Então, como saber se o mandado que eles estão te apresentando é verdadeiro ou não? A forma de saber disso é olhando quem assinou o mandado. O mandado verdadeiro é assinado por um juiz. Isso porque o ICE tem um próprio tipo de mandado que é assinado por qualquer pessoa e isso não importa para você. Então, você tem a obrigação de abrir a porta da sua casa caso esse mandado seja verdadeiro, ou seja, assinado por um juiz.
So it's important, if you're in a situation where somebody comes to your door and says, open up, we have a warrant, that you ask a little bit more, that you ask to see the warrant. I'll go back one slide so you can see what a criminal warrant looks like. That could be your local police. But most of the time, ICE will not have a criminal warrant for you.
Na maioria das vezes, o ICE não tem um mandado verdadeiro assinado contra você. Então, se eles baterem na sua porta, é importante que você pergunte outras coisas, que você peça para dar uma olhada nesse mandado.
And now, of course, the other place where you do have to speak is in your vehicle. The driver does have to show a license and the registration of the car, though the passenger does not, and that's important to know. If police or immigration ask a passenger in a car for ID, that passenger does not have to show it. It may be a good idea to show it if the person has it and there's no problem, and that's a choice that that passenger makes. But it's important to know that there's no legal basis unless there's a crime being committed to ask for or to compel a passenger to give over identification.
Outro lugar onde você pode entrar em contato com agentes da ICE é dentro do seu carro. Então, é claro que o motorista, a pessoa que está dirigindo o carro, tem que mostrar sua carteira de motorista e tem que mostrar o registro do carro. Mas é importante saber que o passageiro não precisa. Então, o passageiro não precisa mostrar sua identificação, a não ser que o policial acredite que ele tenha cometido um crime.
Now, what happens if ICE comes to your workplace? I said, we have not seen this kind of raids here, and that's a good thing. But if they do come, it's important not to run. It's important to remain silent and not give over any information about who you are, where you are from, or your immigration status.
Se a imigração for no seu trabalho. Se a imigração for no seu trabalho, é importante que você não corra. É importante que você não responda nada. Você lembre-se que você tem o direito de permanecer em silêncio. Não dê informações, portanto, de onde você é, quando você chegou, esse tipo de pergunta.
And it's important, lastly, never to show false documents. Even if you have them, do not show them to an immigration agent.
Importante também não mostrar documentos falsos. Mesmo que você tenha documentos falsos, é importante você não mostrá-los a agentes da imigração.
Now, if you do have legal status, if you're an immigrant with a green card or any other kind of legal status, it's good to carry those papers with you. In fact, you have a legal obligation to have them with you, and if an immigration agent asks you for them, you should show them.
Se você tem status imigratório, se você está dentro do seu status imigratório, é importante você sempre carregar com você documentos que comprovem que você tem esse status imigratório.
And now I want to show you two things that you can find in the tables in the back. This is a little Know Your Rights card in Portuguese that we can post in this back there. And this is a little card that you can keep with you and show to an ICE agent or any law enforcement official if you do not wish to speak to them. Sometimes it's hard to just come up with the words to say, I don't want to talk, and it's hard. So we wrote it down. We said, I'm choosing to exercise my legal rights. I'll remain silent. If I'm detained, I have the right to contact an attorney. And you can just give this. It's in English, they will understand. You can just give this to an immigration agent and sort of assert your rights that way. And they're back there, grab a bunch and share them with your friends.
Na hora do confronto, o que acontece é que você pode acabar ficando nervoso e não conseguindo falar para os agentes que você sabe quais são os seus direitos. Por isso foram feitos alguns cartõezinhos que estão disponíveis aqui, para que você mostre para os oficiais, e lá estão escritos os seus direitos, para que ele saiba que você conhece os seus direitos, que você está pronto para defendê-los.
Okay, before I move on to another little piece, I can stop there and see if there are any questions.
Back there. The aisle. Brown and white.
So is there documentation of ICE agents actually engaging in this practice of producing their own homegrown warrant that isn't an official warrant? And if that is the case, is that not in and of itself something that the ACLU should be challenging? I mean, it would seem to me that would be a practice which itself would be quite dubious from a legal point of view, is it not? That's question one. The second question is, we should say a little bit more about the extension of constitutional rights to people, at least in the context of, let's say, consular officers granting visas to come into the country. I think it's widely observed that the Constitution does not extend to citizens of other countries who are not here. But let's say you are able to get to the United States illegally. Does the Constitution then apply to you in these contexts?
A primeira pergunta foi, se o ICE parece estar fazendo os próprios documentos, como é o caso do mandado, isso não seria alguma coisa que a associação, a ACLU, deveria estar tentando resistir, deveria estar tentando confrontar? A segunda pergunta é, a Constituição dos Estados Unidos se aplica para aqueles imigrantes que também chegaram aqui ilegalmente?
So to the first question, yes, that is absolutely a problem. ICE does, and this is documented, they do use this ICE warrant as sort of their way of gaining entry and their way of doing a lot of things. We are challenging it in the context of them using these warrants to sort of convince police that they can hold somebody on their behalf. So they put out something called an ICE detainer, which is a request to local police to hold a person, and they attach an ICE warrant to that, as if that gave enough probable cause and legal backbone to hold that person.
A resposta da primeira pergunta é sim, isso é um problema, o ICE realmente faz isso, mas a ACLU é uma associação que está confrontando esse tipo de política.
And there have been reports, and it is documented, that ICE agents lie. They say they're police when they are not. Their vests, if you look online, their vests say police, ICE. And they intentionally do this to confuse people into thinking that they are local police.
Eles têm práticas que são feitas para confundir as pessoas. Eles mentem e até mesmo o uniforme deles é feito de uma forma para você pensar que eles são policiais.
And to the second question, the relevant parts of the Constitution, the ones that we're talking about here, the Fourth Amendment right to be free from unreasonable searches and seizures, the Fifth Amendment right to due process, the Eighth Amendment right, all of these apply to anybody who's here in the United States, no matter how you entered. If you're outside the United States, that's very different, of course, and of course you can't vote if you're not here, if you're not a U.S. citizen. There are some rights that don't apply. But for this context, for what the police can do to you, what the government can do to you, those rights apply equally across the board to everyone.
Com relação à Constituição sendo aplicada aos imigrantes ilegais, as partes mais importantes da Constituição, como são aquelas que dizem respeito ao que a polícia pode fazer com você, essa parte se aplica a imigrantes ilegais também, independentemente de como você chegou aqui, você vai ser protegido por essas partes da Constituição.
Just one quick question to clarify. If you open the door and an ICE agent is standing there, I assume this does not mean that you have to let him in. You can still say, you're at the door, but I'm not inviting you in. I assume you can say that.
A terceira pergunta agora é a seguinte. Se eles aparecerem na sua porta, é alguma coisa que você pode fazer? É falar, olha, você está aqui na minha porta, mas eu não preciso deixar você entrar.
That's absolutely right. Your home is your castle. The Fourth Amendment protects your home. You don't have to let them in even if the door is open or unlocked. And once they're in, you don't have to speak to them. You can ask them to leave. Those are still your rights. This is still your home and you can still do that. And it doesn't even have to be your home, I should clarify. You could be at a friend's house. You could be at a cousin's house. You could be a renter or an owner. Those things don't matter. It's just a matter of if it's a private place where there's a reasonable expectation of privacy.
A quarta emenda da Constituição protege a sua casa como sua parte privada, ou seja, mesmo que a porta esteja destrancada, mesmo que a porta esteja aberta, você não tem a obrigação de deixá-los entrar. E uma vez que eles estejam lá dentro, você não tem a obrigação de falar com eles.
Okay, and now I want to move on to what we can do to protect ourselves. If we believe we have a vulnerability, if it's possible that we could be deported, what are some steps we can take proactively, kind of as an insurance policy, kind of as protection? It's important sort of not to panic, but to prepare. So what are the things we can do to prepare for that eventuality?
O que a gente pode fazer de forma proativa para que a gente possa se preparar para uma eventualidade dessa?
And the first thing to do is to create a family plan. Who is going to take care of your children, especially? Who is going to take care of paying the rent? Who's going to have access to your bank account? And in the back, I have brought a whole bunch of documents that will guide you through this. Something called Guide for Detained or Removed Parents. There is something from the probate court called the Massachusetts Caregiver Authorization Affidavit. And those are really important documents to start filling out, to start thinking about especially who could you designate to take care of your children if you are detained for a few days, a few hours, or deported for longer.
Primeira coisa, crie plano familiar. Caso você seja detido, quem é que vai tomar conta das suas crianças? Caso você seja detido, quem é que vai pagar as suas contas? É importante que você já tenha se organizado com relação a essas coisas, mesmo antes de alguma coisa acontecer. Mesmo que nada aconteça, é importante que você já tenha isso organizado.
And you have the right to consult an attorney, so this is the time to do so. I will give you some resources at the end, but if you don't know what your status is, if you're unsure of whether you can be deported, this is the time to speak to an immigration attorney about that.
Esse é o momento de você falar com um advogado de imigração. Se você não tem certeza sobre qual é o seu status imigratório, se você não tem certeza sobre se está sujeito à deportação ou não, agora é a hora de você se informar através de uma consulta com um advogado de imigração.
And this seems very simple, that memorize important phone numbers. I know I don't know them if they're not in my phone. Memorize the phone numbers of your spouse, of a sister or brother, a person you trust in your community to be there if something happens to you, and an attorney, of course, if you have one.
Memorize os telefones das pessoas mais importantes para você naquele momento. De um advogado, de uma pessoa da comunidade que pode te ajudar. Memorize o telefone dos seus familiares mais próximos, de quem pode estar ali para você caso algo aconteça.
Keep important documents like birth certificates, passports, somewhere safe and where somebody else knows where they are. You may need them if something happens to you.
Guarde num local seguro seus documentos mais importantes, como passaporte e certidão de nascimento.
And think about signing something called a power of attorney. I've brought a sample one that's in the back. It's a limited, general, durable power of attorney. It allows somebody that you trust to take care of your affairs. It allows them access to your financials. It allows them to do a lot of things that you won't be able to do if you were detained or deported.
Pense sobre assinar uma procuração, dando para alguém que você confie o poder de administrar sua vida financeira caso você não esteja disponível por estar detido, por exemplo.
These are very difficult and sensitive discussions to have with your family, but this is the time to have them. Just get it over with. Think about it as, an insurance policy. It's very important to have these conversations ahead of time so you're not scrambling if something does happen.
Esse é um assunto muito delicado, mas esse é o momento de você conversar com a sua família sobre isso. Esse é o momento que você tem que ter essa conversa com eles, mesmo que seja um assunto tão chato sobre o qual você tem que falar.
And if someone you know is detained, there's a way to find where they are. And that's just a website called locator.ice.gov. And that should tell you where that person is in detention, because unfortunately, immigration has a vast network of hundreds and hundreds of detention beds around the country, and they could be literally in any of those beds.
Caso uma pessoa querida, um ente querido seu seja detido, existe uma forma de você descobrir onde essa pessoa se encontra. E isso é através do próprio site da imigração.
Any questions on that piece? forms are in the back, so please, take some, pass them on. We have plenty of forms if you would like to distribute those forms in any community centers or any places. Feel free to take as many as you like. Okay, so this is the last part, my favorite part, of course. How can we stand up and resist together? And number one, we're already doing it, right? We're here, we're in this room, we're getting information, and we're passing it on.
O que nós podemos agora fazer para que a gente possa resistir isso de forma conjunta?
And number one is to pass local policies that protect immigrants. And I know that many areas on the Cape and the islands have already passed good policies where the police come out and say, this is what we do and this is what we don't do. And some of those are similar to sanctuary city policies, and then there are other kinds of policies where you just make sure that you're welcoming, that you're not asking about immigration status if you don't need to, and that you're not discriminating.
Uma das formas de você se proteger e resistir é fazer com que sejam aprovadas medidas legais que protejam os imigrantes.
And educate others about their rights. Now that you know these rights, tell others about it. Maybe invite people to do more forums. Let's just spread the word and empower ourselves.
Informar as pessoas sobre os direitos que elas têm. Agora que você sabe quais são os direitos que você tem, passe isso para frente. Converse com as outras pessoas, diga para as outras pessoas os direitos que você aprendeu que você tem agora.
And now the Safe Communities Act. Representative Fernandes already talked about it. This is a statewide bill that's pending in our State House right now. What it would do is it creates statewide policies that limit how local agencies interact with immigration and customs enforcement.
Uma das medidas é a Safe Communities Act, que é uma medida que cria formas de limitar o poder que algumas agências locais têm de agir como agentes da imigração.
I have a handout in the back about the Safe Communities Act. And as you've already heard, June 9th, there will be a hearing at the State House in rooms A1 to A2. And if you can make the trip to Boston, please let me know. We would love to get you on a panel to speak about what's happening in your community, to let the legislators know that this area really cares. And let me tell you something, the opposition is mobilized. We've gotten some leaked emails from the opposition. They're coming up very strong, and they are going to bring their people. What time? 10 a.m.
Algumas audiências sobre esse assunto acontecerão em Boston e o panfleto com as informações também está sendo disponibilizado neste evento.
Any questions about the Secure Communities Act? It's a little complicated. It covers a lot, but in general, it just limits how we interact with the federal immigration detention machine.
Can you just explain how the Secure Communities Act, how the decision on the Supreme Judicial, how that will interplay with the Secure Communities Act?
That's a very good question, thank you. So the decision we're waiting on, and we don't know when the court is going to rule, but the decision we're waiting on would touch upon one kind of collaboration, and that's detention. That's when courts and police can detain somebody on behalf of ICE. Our bill touches on many different kinds. So that's one kind. The most extreme kind, I would say, is the 287G agreements you may have heard about, which Sheriff Hodgson has and a couple other entities have. And that's when you actually deputize and train and give the power of federal agents to local agents. That's sort of the most extreme. This bill would also prohibit anybody from taking part in raids and roundups. It would prohibit us from becoming part of a Muslim registry. It would give basic due process and notice to anyone who is in detention, so it's a lot broader than what the court will decide.
Uma das coisas que vai ser decidida sobre essa medida é, por exemplo, o poder que as agências federais têm de obrigar os policiais locais a agirem como oficiais de imigração. Então, também vão ser decididas coisas como, por exemplo, se as pessoas vão ter que se registrar caso sejam muçulmanos.
Okay, anything else on Safe Communities Act? Yeah.
Well, it's not on the Safe Communities Act exactly.
Okay, do you want to just wait till we're almost done?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, great. And lastly, I just want to give a very important resource, which is that if you are on the Vineyard and need to see an immigration attorney, the folks at Martha's Vineyard Community Service are bringing in a free lawyer who will speak to you the first Friday of every month from 9 to 3 p.m. And you have to call and make an appointment. but they're bringing in someone that you can talk to for free.
Na primeira sexta-feira de cada mês, existe um advogado gratuito que está sendo apresentado aqui pela comunidade, pelos serviços comunitários de Martha's Vineyard, e você pode marcar uma consulta com ele.
And if you have trouble finding a free or pro bono attorney, because there are so few of them in so many cases right now, a place to go to find a for-profit attorney is ACLU. It's the American Immigration Lawyers Association. They're essentially the bar association for immigration lawyers.
Na ACLU, que é uma associação de advogados de imigração nos Estados Unidos, você pode encontrar uma lista de advogados que trabalham com imigração.
And so that concludes the formal part, and I think we can open it up to more questions. Right?
Thank you both. Are there any questions? Yes, yeah. One here. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to say we, on Martha's Vineyard in all 6 town meetings this spring, passed an article supporting community policing, and with the implication that we do not want our local law enforcement to participate in 287G programs, and that was a big piece of the dialogue leading up to the passage of those articles. So it feels like the island is really on the right track, and we're having the right conversation, and I really appreciate both of you contributing to it. I'm wondering if you can speak at all to the concept of basically being a bystander or bearing witness to an ICE arrest or an ICE interrogation. Because my understanding from a couple months ago, and one of the conversations that we've had in the Know Your Rights related to immigration, is that I sort of started to get savvy to the fact that a lot of people were learning their rights and not answering the door, so would wait until they were leaving the house. So one of the conversations that's been happening on the island is if you see that outside of someone's home, what do you as a citizen, what can you do to help? What can you do to support that situation? Because out in public, it seems like a very different dynamic, and people sometimes get very flustered.
That's a really great question. Thank you for that. And I really appreciate the spirit in which it's asked, and the idea of, how do we bear witness, as you said. Technically, it does get tricky, right? Because you've got the person who is being detained and their privacy rights, and whether they want to, want somebody to bear witness. On the other side, the more we publicize maybe inhumane tactics, the more we can hold them accountable. And you could there's a parallel to the Black Lives Matter movement, right, where video has been so important in showing the abuse of power. And I think, I don't know if there's an easy answer. I think each situation is different in terms of, do you film, do you go live, do you just, do you spread the word? What do you do in that particular situation when that person is in such a vulnerable position? So I think those are conversations that you need to have with the people who are vulnerable to deportation about, and what many groups are doing, there's a group called the Student Immigrant Movement in Massachusetts, and they're the Dreamers. They're just fantastic. And what they're doing is they're doing small networks of people. So they're hooking up 2 undocumented students with 2 allies. U.S. citizens or people who can help them, and they know each other. And if something happens, they know to call each other and to bear witness because that person has asked for it. So maybe forming those sort of small groups would be one way to do it. And then I'm also seeing congregations do things like raise money for bond fund. When immigrants get detained, oftentimes they can be let go on bond, and those bonds are becoming higher and higher and higher, and they're more difficult to pay. So people who want to do something are gathering to get money together for legal fees, for bond, and to just bear witness in that way.
I'm confused about something. I keep reading in the paper comments about this question of ICE asking for a detainer on people who've been held in local jails. Now, just let me try to quickly. If someone's being held in a local jail, awaiting trial for some charge, and ICE puts a detainer on, say, which I believe means, think it means that ICE is saying, do not let this person go. We will come and pick him up at some perhaps unspecified time in the future, but hold him until we get there. If the person's allowed to make bail, then of course he would be leaving the local jail. Or if, when his case is disposed of, he does not get a sentence or is put on probation or acquitted, again, he can leave. Now, what the Safe Communities Act and other efforts to resist ICE, are they in effect taking the position that if ICE is a detainer on someone in that situation, that the local community can just ignore it and say, no, if we'll give him bail if he wants it, or if he can make it, or we will release him once the case is over, regardless of whether you want him detained or not? Well, what is the situation there? I don't really understand.
I think that's a great way to sum it up. A detainer is a request from the federal government to hold a person who's about to be released. So it's a person who's in custody, and because they post bail, because their sentence finishes, for whatever reason, that person is about to be released through the criminal justice system. And the detainer says, no, don't let them go, hold them for, and the statute says 48 hours, no more than 48 hours, so that we can come and get them. And also let us know ahead of time if he's about to be released. And
I just want to jump in for 1 second. I'm sorry.
Oh.
I have to bring Gabriella to the vote, so I have to run. But before I do, I just want to say we brought some wage and hour information in Portuguese. We brought workers' rights information in Portuguese and landlord-tenant rights in Portuguese. Those are all out on the table, so please pick them up and distribute those. And whoever has a question, or if there's ever an issue here on the Vineyard, can always contact my office directly, and my information, my cell phone, is right on my website. So reach out anytime. Thank you, and thank you again. Thank you. This was terrific. By the way. I thought it was really important. Thank you.
Okay, so to back up, yes, that's exactly what it is. It's a request to hold that person for 48 hours so that ICE can come and get them. Here's the constitutional argument. When you hold that person after they're supposed to be released, that is a new arrest. You are arresting that person all over again. And in order to deprive a person of their liberty, to arrest them, to detain them, you need to show that you have probable cause that the person has committed a crime. That is what the Fourth Amendment requires of anyone. And what we're saying in the Lund case and in other places is that the police, number one, has no statutory authority to detain a person without probable cause of a crime, and number two, that violates their Fourth Amendment rights. Now, the federal government has its own authority to arrest people on immigration charges, but our local police do not. And so that is the line of questioning that the federal government got in the Lund case, and that's what we're hoping the Supreme Judicial Court will clarify.
Do you know any of the particulars about the two people that were picked up here a few months ago? Because I've heard conflicting information about why they were picked up and where they were taken and what's happening.
I don't. Does anybody else know about those two people?
You can talk to her. Anyone back there?
I wonder if the Civil Liberties Union has a general position on the coercive use of the federal spending power. I realize that when it comes to commandeering state police, there's a federalism issue. But let's talk about other kinds of sanctuary sites like private universities. Let's say the federal government wants a private university to hand over information about students who may be there who they know to be illegal. And they basically say, and unless you do this, all federal money that now supports the university, which could be a substantial amount of the budget, and the loss of which would be utterly devastating to a private university, most of them, they basically threaten them that way. Does the Civil Liberties Union have a position on that kind of use, and is that something that would be conceivable? It's not a federalism issue, obviously. It's a private university versus the federal government, and they've been getting money from the federal government.
So we have taken a position vis-a-vis cities, not private universities, but I assume that it would be a little bit similar. But vis-a-vis cities, this coercion, this holding of the funding over their heads is both a 10th Amendment issue, commandeering, but also it's just an extreme view of the spending clause. We have argued that it is outside the scope of the spending clause, and that President Trump's executive order about sanctuary cities is unconstitutional for both of those reasons. Because, and actually because of the president's executive authority. I think there were 3 reasons that we argued there.
So would that same principle apply to the use of federal money in the context of Title IX, for example?
It's very likely. I don't know if we've argued that on the record, so I don't want to say what our position is, but it does seem that it would be consistent with our position in other cases.
Ron?
Yes. How shocking. I just want to come back, if I might, one more time to the Commonwealth of Vermont.
Yes.
So if it is decided in favor of, it's in opposition to what ICE wanted to do, will that then become, in essence, the law, if you will, of Massachusetts or for the United States?
That is it's a case that's very specific to Massachusetts. There have been federal cases around the country based on the 4th Amendment issue. Ours is the first where a state court has taken up the question of whether our local police and courts have the state authority to make such an arrest. So that would be the first of its kind and would apply only to Massachusetts. We hope that it would start, a trend that other courts would take it up as well. But on that particular issue of state authority, that would bind only, it would only bind Massachusetts, no matter what the court says, although it could certainly be regarded as, as authority in other places.
And there's no issue then of that court case going on somewhat of a parallel track with the Safe Communities Act. I understand that the Safe Communities Act is far broader, but if there is an issue based on between the points in the Safe Communities Act and the decision by the Supreme Judicial Court, would that get worked out in the...
Right, I think we would probably have to amend the language of the bill because one of the points in the Safe Communities Act is that nobody can hold people on detainers. Right, so if the court has already spoken that's illegal, that language would seem superfluous. So we would probably amend it to say, something in the whereas section. I'm making this up, I don't know. We would amend it so that it says that we're consistent with what the Supreme Judicial Court has said, and maybe not worry so much about that piece anymore.